And let's start off with you, Joyce, and let's go around so we can get to our lesson here. Let's see how everybody's doing. Joyce, how are you?
We're doing fine. Ken hasn't gotten the relief he was hoping for after his rhizotomy, but he will be seeing his doctor this coming week, and he will see if that's normal or what the deal is. So,
is there a chance it could continue to improve, or would he know by now?
well, they did say at first you're going to feel, a little pain, but it's almost 2 weeks now. So he has to talk to the doctor. He really didn't get a chance to talk to him before the shot. So he'll find out more this week. So,
but is he getting some relief compared to what it was before the pain? Is it some better? No. Sorry.
Well, keep us posted on that one very much. Diana, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
And you're getting your second shot today.
I get my second shot today. So I called yesterday to see if I could switch to yesterday, because I thought if I have a response, I don't want it to interfere with my going to work on Monday, but they couldn't change me. So I'm hoping that it doesn't hit me enough that I can't, go to work. But if it does, then so be it. It's temporary. But anyway.
I'm glad you're getting that today. That's wonderful. And Jerry, how about you?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. And I do have a praise this morning in the for a prayer request, and that is that Bob and now Hardy have rejoined.
The Hardys, yes. That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Jerry, where were they before? Did they go to Park Cities? Or?
I think they did. Vicki, do you know? Because they,
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure they went to Park Cities. They were in the Park Cities group, but they have remained active in New Song.
Yeah.
They're charter members, and they have remained active all these years.
Yeah.
Good. Very
They're
good.
really slowing down, though. They are really slowing down.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm glad they're back. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the best.
That's good. That's good. Carrie, how are you and Dave doing?
We're doing fine now. He doesn't have a doctor at Southwestern. And the only reason I did is because my dog pulled me down. Y'all remember, and I had the concussion and I had to see a doctor over there. So you can be thankful for bad things, because I was thankful that I had a doctor over at Southwestern. But he gets his shot Monday.
Good.
And yeah, we're fine.
Good. Very good. Jim and Kay, how are you guys doing?
We're doing well.
Good. You still working on patients there, Jim?
Slowly.
That's a good way to do it. That's a good way to do it. Laura, how are you and Ray doing?
We're doing well. My cousin's husband who came home, she had no idea what shape he would be in. She thought he would be a lot better off than he is. He's not. She has hurt her back helping him do things, and she's been in a lot of pain with that. They told him before he left the hospital that they would be getting him a wheelchair and all this stuff, and they did not get the wheelchair from the hospital, but somebody else gave them the wheelchair. But it's real sad. I just think this is one of those cases that he's probably not going to make it.
No, my. This is Peggy and Pete, right?
Peggy and Pete. Yeah. And I forgot what I was going to say. That's okay.
Well, I hope that Peggy can manage, this. I know that's a burden on her. Okay.
Laura, just so you know, it's standard that a hospital would not be providing the wheelchair. They contract that stuff out. So that is not unusual that they would send somebody else. It's just a lot of times it depends on who's arranging it as to whether or not it gets followed through with, unfortunately. So.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Brad, how are you? And Kenda, we saw both of you this morning on the service this morning, and your daughter. How's the family doing?
Yeah, we're doing well. We've had 2 of our adult children with us since COVID started. One, Alyssa, our youngest, is still in college, and our our son just graduated last summer, and actually he's planning to go to med school in another year or so. But we're doing good. We have them and we have their dogs, and we, the house is full of people and stuff. I'm actually on a 60-day non-compete transition to a new job. So I'm very excited about the job I'm going to. It was kind of an ugly exit, unfortunately, after 6 years, the company I was with. But so now I have 60 days I can't go anywhere, can't do anything. But I can teach Bible study and I can do some other things.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I want to hear all about the new job when you can tell us later.
Sure.
Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. No news.
Very good. Patty and Travis?
We're doing well.
Everything's good.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Linda, you're muted right now. Linda Gelzer, can you, yeah.
I am,
how are you doing, Linda?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I just got my appointment today for Kroger's to do my next vaccine. I'll do it on February 5th, on Friday. So unlike Diana, I plan mine on Friday, so I can ruin my. No, I did have quite a few. I had quite a reaction to my first one, but like everybody else said, it's a small price to pay. So didn't have any throwing up, but I sure had the soreness, man. Woo.
Wow.
And I still, from time to time, it's weird. I get the red rash that shows up around the injection site, and then it'll be there for 24 hours or something. So I think I have a really strong immune system. It's just really reacting.
Yeah.
So, but otherwise I'm doing well. We're just drowned work. I was with Diana yesterday when she asked. I said I just want one day, one 24-hour period when I do not have to look at an email or anticipate any messages from my boss. That's what happens when you have a new boss in the middle of a pandemic and she's overzealous.
No,
I think so.
well, good luck.
Anyway, I just don't look at it, and I figured if she wants me to know, she'll call me. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, good
Okay.
stuff. I'm working. That's all that matters, right?
That's good.
So it's all good.
Bonnie, how are you and Robert doing?
We're good. Thank you. Yep.
Very
Hanging
good.
out.
I like that. And Vicky, how are you? You're still in Florida. You'll be in Florida the rest of this week, right?
Yes, and so I ask for prayer for traveling mercies. We're going to leave on Friday and visit an aunt on Saturday night. We'll spend the night with them, so it's going to take us a little longer to get home, but that's okay. You know, we don't have to be in a hurry. We'll get home Sunday afternoon late. So we're trying to be really careful. I've been out. If you've been on my Facebook page, I'm out, but we wear masks and we're first in line and nobody's there. And I mean, we've just been really lucky that we've not had crowds. And if there are a lot of people, we just don't go, you know?
Right.
So we're really trying to be, I mean, it looks like we're doing a lot of stuff, but we're really being careful where we are. So.
Good. Very good. Thank
Looks
you.
like you're sharing the scenery with us.
I am. I thought you might want to see a boat just
Yeah.
went by. We're the house is on a lake. It's a little lake in
Wow.
Tampa. Yeah. But it's really a beautiful view. I mean, we have water all around us. And I mean, it's just, you can just sit and read and look out the window whether you go. It's going to be 79 today. So I'm just in heaven. I'm not a winter person. I just don't like winter. So I'm loving this. My niece is here with me. So we're
I
having a
love
good
all
time.
those windows.
Yes.
That's great. Well, safe travels. Safe travels.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Everything's good though.
Good. Dale, how are you doing?
We're doing good. I'm with my dad. He's right here. We just left the lake.
Good.
Took the dog for a walk, so we're together. So
Good.
nice to
Good.
see everybody. We saw Bert in person at Eatsy's. Just ran into him, so that was a good feeling instead of looking on a computer.
Yes. That's great. That's great. And Carolyn, you're one of the benefits of Zoom Sunday school lessons, being able to see you from Arkansas. So how are you doing?
So is moving right along, right next to Texas. We're just staying with it. It's just the same.
It's a competition, isn't it? Terrible.
Right, I do. I just came from a class, Sunday school class at 2BC. And so I occasionally, when it doesn't run over, I can come over here.
Well, that's great. It's great to see you. Great to see you. Sandra, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I wanted to tell Diana, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wanted to tell Diana that my shot, my Pfizer shot, was at the Baylor Children's Hospital where we went for Christmas decorating. I thought that was kind of funny, but it went very smoothly.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. Kelly, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Nothing to report.
Okay. And Don and Barbara, I know you can't talk, but it's good to see you, and we're glad to thank you for your emails during the week, and hope you and Matt and everybody's doing well. Alice, tell us about your upcoming trip to Houston, taking your friend.
Sally's being interviewed for a trial that they're running in Houston at MD Anderson. We're staying at friends, live 4 blocks away from MD Anderson, so that's working out well. And it's just a matter of when she finds out what the trial is about, if it's something that she feels will be useful to her, and if MD Anderson accepts her. So it's kind of all up in the air. She doesn't know if she's going to take the trial on, or we need to find out what it's about.
Well, it's very kind of you to take her. That's very, what great. That's the hands and feet of Christ right there. Okay, is anyone else have anything to say before we turn this over to Brad? And Brad, if you want to call on people to read, you do that. I'm going to mute everyone, and then Brad, if you'll unmute yourself, then we can go from there. And I'm going to mute me.
Awesome. Okay. Well, good morning to everyone. It's great to be back with you. I always enjoy teaching this class. You guys are thinkers and you ask lots of hard questions, and it makes it kind of a robust discussion for everyone. We're going to be looking at a set of texts that are gathered together under the topic of the Good Shepherd, which is really a reference to the second text. The first one will be Matthew 20 to 34. That's kind of got 2 big stories in there. And then we'll look at John 10, 1 through 21. So if you have a Bible or scriptures in some form, you might kind of dog ear those, and we'll come to those in just a moment. I do like you guys to volunteer to read certain sections, so I get tired of hearing my own voice after a while. So I thought I would start though with the little event that we had in Washington, D.C. This week. How many of you watched some or part of the inauguration? Okay, a bunch of you did. Great. You may have read about it afterwards or something like that. You know, one of the common themes of all the observers has been a very obvious recognition that the message was very different than what we've heard in the past. And so we have a new president that spent a lot of time focusing on the theme of unity and really kind of, what I would say, dislodging self-interest at the political center. And kind of re-enshrining some classic American virtues such as liberty and justice for all. And one of the things that he did is he quoted St. Augustine. And I don't know if you recall that he did that. Joe Biden is a Roman Catholic, regular church attender, deeply spiritual person, regardless of what you think about his political views. And he quoted Augustine, and what he said is he remembered where Augustine wrote that a nation is defined as a multitude of rational beings united by the common objects of our love. And by the way, it is Augustine and not Augustine. Every time a media commentator refers to Augustine as Augustine, because that's not really how you pronounce his name. But Biden then went on to ask kind of rhetorically, what are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? And what he suggested were things like opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and the truth. So my question for you just to start with is, what's your reaction to kind of just overall that message, and then kind of Augustine's definition of a nation or citizenry as defined by the common objects they love? What are your thoughts?
I think I like the idea because it doesn't say that everybody has to line up and be the same, but we kind of have shared goals. And, you know, maybe we don't have all exactly the same shared goals, but overall, we try to pull in the same direction. And that's what I take from that. And I really like that kind of thought.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dennis. Anybody not like that message or would have liked it said differently? Well, it's interesting. You know, some people, when they hear any kind of religion used as a kind of a moral foundation, you know, they cringe. You know, we see both believers and non-believers cringing a little bit sometimes when they see in public discourse, political leaders, you know, using religion as kind of a moral foundation. So regardless of whether you think that's it's an exhibition of civil religion, which is kind of an unhealthy blending of church and state, or whether it's completely acceptable, given that he's not indoctrinating people, right? He's not doing theology so much as he's doing ethics. It is an interesting approach where Biden is clearly drawing on his religious heritage, right? His theological, spiritual foundations, but he's using it in a way that provides an ethical source of unity, regardless of how you arrive at those values, right? So regardless of how you arrive at liberty and justice and dignity and respect and honor, he's not telling you how to get there. He's just pointing a spotlight on that these are common values that we do share in our history and that we can unify around these things. So, I mean, from my perspective, it's kind of a very healthy way for a person of faith who's serving in the public sphere to both use their personal faith as a resource without crossing over the line and using it as some kind of coercive club or something like that. So people who are on the side of more of a theocracy, you know, they want him to hammer home God and really, you know, expand on Augustine. And Augustine ultimately would say that love of God is what makes all those values possible, right? But Biden doesn't say that. My point of just opening with this observation is that, at least at the national level today, there is this move to recenter the way we think of ourselves in relationship with our neighbors and our fellow citizens in a way that, in fact, is less self-interested and more focused on the common good. And I think you're going to see this theme in our text today worked out in a variety of ways. First, at kind of an individual level, and then thinking more broadly about some of the political religious structures that that we all live in. So let's dive into the text. So I'm going to ask if someone would read our first section, and this is Matthew 20, verses 20 through 22. Who will volunteer to read? Just, all right. Travis?
Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came to him with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked a favor of him. And he said to her, "What do you want?" She said to him, "Declare that these two sons of mine will sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your kingdom." But Jesus answered, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink?" They said to him, "We are able." He said to them, "You will indeed drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left, this is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father."
Okay, let's just stop right there. I gave you an extra.
Oh, I'm sorry. I went an
No, you're good. You're good. You're all good. All right, very good. So I think this story is probably familiar to a lot of you. Let's just establish up front, what is good old Mother Zebedee up to?
Trying to angle for position for her sons.
Trying to angle for position for her sons.
I never noticed until today when Travis was reading, they said unto him. I always thought her mother kind of came to him on the side or something.
Yeah.
Apparently he came with their sons. So.
Yeah. I think we can safely read it as they know what she's doing and they're all in, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Any other thing you would add about what Mother Zebedee's motives are, or what's her end game, the opportunity that she sees? What do you think?
He wants to buy Apple stock at $5 a share.
Buy low, sell high. Yeah, get in while the getting's good.
Yes.
I feel like it's self-interest.
Okay.
That is, because it will also honor her if they sit at the right and the left of Jesus.
Yeah, she's got her future is inextricably tied to the success of her sons, especially in that culture, for sure.
Right. Laura, I was just thinking that it kind of like, it reminds me of a stage mother, you know, but the bottom motive is, what am I going to get out of this if my sons are honored in this way? So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think we recognize that this is not abnormal behavior. Is it? I mean, apart from moral judgment, I mean, this is pretty normal human behavior for, you know, a mother to want the very best for her sons and to leverage, you know, whatever influence she has, whether it's the PTA or it's the country club or it's the neighbors or it's her own boss or friends' bosses or, you know, whatever. There is a sense in which human beings aspire and we advance by, you know, leveraging social connections. At the same time, right, we can recognize in a more general sense, this is, as you've already said, about the pursuit of individual honor and reward, right? And you really, individual honor and reward is always held in tension with the good of others, right? So it's almost like you can divide the world into competitors and collaborators. And so in one sense, it seems that this story just casts light on what is very much a human practice, and that is that we pursue personal gain. It's kind of at the bedrock. Even these young men who were responding to the word of Jesus, they were thrilled at participating in the ministry. They were loyal foot soldiers, and in fact, they will be to their deaths. Tradition says that they both die horrible, gruesome deaths as martyrs. And so here she is. She's boldly, audaciously asking Jesus to basically help her sons jump the line, right? Before you come into your glory. And by the way, when she has come into mind coming into glory, she really means being king of Israel, right? So once you get to be king of Israel, Prime Minister A and Prime Minister B, you know, need to be named James and John. What is underneath what she wants? What is at stake with her big ask from Jesus's perspective? What can you infer from the way he responds? What is he hearing in what she's asking him to do? Is this just a human resources decision?
You know, I feel like Jesus is looking at it from his perspective because I think he knows what is in store for him. And he wants to know if they are ready to drink from the same cup that he is.
Okay. Yeah, very good. So his brain immediately goes to not them and roles and rewards and honor, but the tasks, right? What it means to be his disciple, right? Okay. Any other thoughts about what you think Jesus may see as at stake in the way he answers this question?
He knew her thoughts, first of all. He knew she was wanting him to be a king and for her sons to have privilege. But he gently talked to her. He didn't put down that thought.
Yeah, that's a great point, Carolyn. I mean, he does see through the conversation, right? And he sees this mix of motherly concern, but also just a lack of understanding, you know, the lives that they're called to lead. So, I mean, we could say, I mean, what's at stake is it's human relationships, not only in how he responds to her. I mean, he's modeling kind of the character of the kingdom, both in this conversation as well as in the greater task that they're going to do. I mean, what's really at stake, it's we could say it's a new understanding of power and relationships. What's at stake is the purpose of Jesus's mission, the character of his disciple, the depth of understanding of who Jesus is, his identity, and what his purpose is. So let's look specifically. So Jesus, as Laura already pointed out, he answered with this metaphor, right? You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink? What is Jesus talking about? What is this metaphorical cup?
Well, he referred to the cup in the Garden of Gethsemane, I guess, before his crucifixion. If this cup could be taken away from me, I've always thought of that as the hard challenges ahead, the responsibilities, the duties, that you may get all these honors, but you get to pay for that with the responsibilities and duties that come along with it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, whether we call it the cup of suffering or the cup of martyrdom or the cup of self-giving love, these are the centerpiece of the meaning of the crucifixion, right? That this is the very centerpiece of our doctrine of salvation, right? That Jesus voluntarily laid down his life out of love for humanity. And so they can't possibly grasp this, of course. And Jesus, over and over again in the Gospels, Jesus foreshadows his suffering. Thomas says, we will go to Jerusalem and we will die with you. And Jesus is like, maybe you will, maybe you won't, and of course, Peter bears that out. When push comes to shove, he denies that he knows him, so their humanity, shows through their cracks over and over again. But, Jesus, like a drumbeat, repeatedly says, I want you to understand, I love you. I'm here to give it all for you. And to be my disciple means, you must put others before yourself and lay down your life for your friends. Greater love hath no man than that, and so he says it over and over again. But of course, they kind of rush past that, right? It's kind of like at a job interview when someone says, can you do this? Can you do that? Whatever. Of course I can. It's like, and if you've ever been on the hiring side of this, you go, I don't think you really understand what we're talking about here, right? So they rush past all that and they say, we're able, si se puede, it's like, we are able. And so he says to them, you will indeed drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left, this is not mine to grant, but it's for those for whom it was been prepared for by Father. What is he trying to get them to understand there?
That it's not his decision.
It's not his decision.
I think that if they were, part of me was, well, it was such a rough time in which to live. She's looking for safety, if her sons are kind of in charge of things, well, let's say you're on the right side of everything. But too, if Jesus was, but I think he's also trying to say, you're not going to get what you think you're going to get out of this. I mean, self-interest, it's not things you do anyway.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're asking. Seriously, you're not asking for what I can't, it's not only my decision what you think you're going to get.
Yeah, it's interesting that
it's more work than it is security.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, thanks, Linda. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that he's in the midst of their bravado, he does turn and look at them and say, oh, you'll drink the cup. So in one hand, he's not diminishing them or their loyalty. In fact, he's prophesying that, in fact, despite the fact that they don't know what they're getting into, they, in fact, are going to die. which is just kind of a sobering thing in the midst of all of this. But then it's almost as if he wants them, like, not even to think about reward. Like, reward is something that the Father is going to handle. It's outside my control. It's really just not something you should be thinking about. Just do the thing. And in fact, you're gonna be faithful. So whatever reward there is for that, you're not doing it for the reward, right? You're doing it because you believe in me, because we have this relationship. That's why you're doing it. And that's probably really a great rule for all things in the spiritual life, right? We're constantly called to love Jesus for who Jesus is, not for what we can get from him, right? That Christian faith is not transactional. We say it that way sometimes. It's not a gift to get, right? It's not that, God, I do this for you, so you'll do this for me. And in our most primitive level of selves, and I'm not sure we're ever really quite free from that. We think we grow up and mature, but these kind of primitive voices are still in our head, I think forever. But God, if I just did this for you, couldn't you do that for me? Right? Or, God, I've done so much for you, and why have I gotten buckus? Later in life, sometimes there can be a lot of bitterness among Christians who have been faithful to God, and you entered the Christian life with certain expectations of how things were supposed to be, which weren't wrong, but life just doesn't work out that way. Our hearts get broken time and time again, and we have to come to grips with the terms of a God that who loves us still and always, and who doesn't really owe us anything. And following him is its own reward. But these are like really, they're easy to say abstractly, but they're painful to live out, in the midst of our love for our spouses and our children and our causes and, the things we care most about. Let's move on a little bit. So somebody read verse 24 to 28.
I've got it. When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many."
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Brian. So let's talk about this. What's going on here? What does this reveal about kind of human relationships looked at through the lens of the individual pursuit of honor and reward?
I think everybody wants to be first, or at least the first among equals or whatever.
Yeah. Well, invariably you have winners and losers, right? And you have all this conflict, right? Because you have jealousy and you have resentment. If you're standing in line and someone jumps the line, how do you feel?
Indignant.
Not so good. Some days you're probably very generous. No, after you. And some days you're like, this is an injustice and outrage, So it depends on how well things are going. But it's not surprising, of course, is it? That their peers, their co-laborers in ministry, this is upsetting to them, right? Your mother, right? And so Jesus says, this whole dynamic that I'm seeing being played out with James and John's personal request and the way you're all reacting, this makes me think of the world, like the Gentiles. Remember, like the Gentiles is kind of code for anything that's not Jewish, right? It's the world, the Goyim, right? This is how they kind of govern their relationships. And what does he say about that? How do people in general govern their relationships?
They lord their authority over each other.
Okay. So we might use the word hierarchies, right? Levels of vertical authority, and those who attain a certain level exercise a certain amount of control over those below them. And so that this pursuit of control, right, inevitably creates resentment by those underneath, right, who have their freedom and their dignity usurped by someone on top of them. And Jesus says that's not how it's supposed to be. So how is it supposed to be?
Looking through sort of a Western society lens, it seems more of a meritocracy. You earn your way into positions of honor. It's not something, you know, you think of the medieval days where all these honors were given to people. And I think of English society in particular with earls and dukes and all those kind of titles that, I don't know, maybe somebody earned them at some point, but then it was just handed down from generation to generation from there. And someone who ended up with the title may have not done a thing to deserve it. And here it seems more of a meritocracy. Not that it's a bad thing, but, and I'm looking at it through a very flawed lens. I get that, but meritocracy is the word that comes to mind.
Yeah, that's good. I work in the tech community a lot, as Dennis does, and maybe some of you do. And people often talk about the tech community being more of a meritocracy than other industries, because it's really about what you can achieve, not where you went to school necessarily, or what race you are, or those kinds of things. It's like if you have the chops to do it, you know, you get rewarded. And if you don't have the chops, you don't get rewarded. So it's not based on servanthood, you know, but it is based upon, you know, advancement by merit, not by some other credential, right, or criteria. Well, yeah. So, I mean, obviously Jesus establishes here this principle that he reiterates other times, and that is that the purpose of life really is not power, but it's servanthood. And this is a really radical notion. It was a radical notion historically, not just given the power structures in place, but in every generation, it's been radical that people would set aside their egos and their personal gain, and they would identify greatness, whether you just think of that as personal greatness of character or greatness of life or whatever, as the capacity to which you can serve others and advance others rather than advancing yourselves. So it really turns everything upside down. And in essence, at the end of the story, what Jesus is saying to James and John is, what I really wish you'd ask me is, how could you advance the life of others? And the only one who's really worthy of sitting at my left and right are people who are most adept at giving it away, not accumulating it.
When you say that, Brad, it reminds me of the people who are the kind of the titans of industry, who have at the end or at their height of their career started giving their fortunes away. Yes, they may have clawed and scratched all the way through it, but finally it came to them that, hey, I can't take all this with me, and I need to do some good with this. And that's kind of what I hear being said on some of this.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example, Dennis, since you mentioned that. There's a man in Baptist life named Paul Piper, who was a personal friend of mine. Carolyn knew probably Paul and his wife, Katie. He decided very on that he would put the lion's share of his wealth into a personal foundation. At the time I knew him before he died, I think it's like 170 million or so in that foundation, maybe more later. He still had plenty to live on. He was quite successful, but he was one of the most humble, generous men I've ever known. And he chose to do that. John Ball was another one, of course. But so these, yeah, Dennis, to your point, I've known some people, good Christian people like that have benefited millions and millions of people because they really believed that their greatness would be revealed by their ability to help advance other people. Well, let's press on. Let's look at verses 29 to 34 just very quickly, and then we'll move on to the Good Shepherd passage. But would someone volunteer to read these passages about the two blind men?
I will. As they were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. There were two blind men sitting by the roadside. When they heard that Jesus was passing by, they shouted, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." The crowd sternly ordered them to be quiet. But they shouted even more loudly, "Have mercy on us, Lord, Son of David." Jesus stood still and called to them, saying, "What do you want me to do for you?" They said to him, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." Moved with compassion, Jesus touched their eyes. Immediately they regained their sight and followed him.
Great, thank you. So we won't go too far into this, but my simple question about this passage is, how does this story illustrate the principle Jesus just taught to his disciples?
It's almost the opposite. They were the ones who were yelling, "Help me!" But
Okay, all right. So on the one hand, Dennis points out that the disciples wanted to advance themselves, and how they're encountered with someone that needs help. Okay.
and on the other hand, once they received their sight, then they did follow. So they were ready to serve.
Yeah, yeah. What about Jesus? What do we learn if I'm James and John and I've just had this conversation, and then I watch Jesus, my master, at work? What do I learn from my mentor?
He has compassion. Jesus has compassion on them, which is what I think he's trying to say when he is saying, "Be a servant to other people." And he asked them, "What do you want me to do for them?" out of his compassion for them, even though the crowd has sternly told them to be quiet.
Excellent. Absolutely. Absolutely. Jesus's actions underscore we are in the compassion business. That's what we do. These two blind men offer him nothing personally. They have no power. There's no gain. In fact, as you point out, the crowd turns against him. So they're not even an obstacle, to his own personal advancement, but it's the right thing to do. How many Christians today would you like to walk up to and look in the eye and say, do you remember that we're in the compassion business? I mean, that's the test, right? You say that you love Jesus, follow Jesus, blah, 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 blah. Do you remember that we're in the compassion business? And if you don't, then maybe you're in the you business, right? The self business. So it's really such a simple little story, but it so profoundly underscores the very point Jesus is trying to make. And no doubt that's why John, or the Johnnine community organizing the scriptures kind of put it right here, because it kind of punctuates the whole point. All right.
Then he's not after fortune or fame, because he doesn't say, "I wonder what these two blind guys have that we might want. I wonder what's in it for us." He also doesn't say, "Well, the crowd, the larger group of people, the crowd wants them to be quiet. So let's do what will make us popular with the crowd." No, they basically, it was, rebuke's not the word I'm looking for, but it was sort of a demonstration to the crowd that what they were saying was wrong, and nobody likes to be told they're wrong. So it's not something that's going to make him more popular, but it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's not exactly winning friends and influencing people.
Yeah.
And yet, in his inner core, that's the whole point, right? Great. All right, so let's press on and let's flip over to John 10. And there's never enough time, always. But if someone would begin by reading John 10, 1 through 6, and of course, this is the famous passage about Jesus unpacking several parables around herding and grazing and shepherds and things like that. So he'll read John 10, 1 through 6.
I've got it.
All right.
I tell you the truth, the man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but they did not understand what he was telling them.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. So as we heard in that very last verse, John or the Johnny community put the scriptures together. They understood this sequence of stories as like a parable, right? It's the closest in John's gospel that we get to John using parables. So the writer just says he used a figure of speech. So it's symbolic speech, right? These are metaphorical symbols. So just to kind of set the context, this teaching occurs right on the heels of John 9. For very quickly, you'll remember the story about Jesus healing a man blind from birth, right? And then he goes and presents himself at the temple, and then they kind of grill him, and the man keeps giving honor to God, and they argue with him that Jesus is really of the devil and he's not from God. And eventually they cast the man out, right? That if you're going to keep getting credit to this Jesus as being from God, and the man is like, well, how could you not appreciate the fact that he must be from God? Maybe your authority, right? Maybe I shouldn't trust you, I should trust him, right? And so at the very end of that, Jesus says, well, the Pharisees say, surely we're not blind, are we? And Jesus says, if you were blind, you would not have sinned. But now that you say we see, your sin remains. So this teaching is in the context of authority structures, right? And authority structures that either are kind of on board with God, his mission, his way of being in the world as embodied in Jesus, at least at the ethical level, if not at the, kind of the theological level. So then Jesus launches into this story about the shepherds, and he contrasts them with thieves and bandits, which we can translate that word thief as like rustler, right? So someone who's intent to steal the sheep. And then he goes on to talk about that. So my first question, this is kind of a critical question for this whole passage, is who does Jesus have in mind when he speaks of shepherds?
God.
Okay, Brian suggests he's thinking of God. All right.
I would say him, but I read this passage yesterday and he refers to himself as the gate later on. So
yeah,
it's like, all right, well, if it's not him, maybe it's God.
Yeah, one interpretive tip I'll tell you is that these metaphors cross over each other. So it's not that they're exclusive buckets with one representative, but it's not unfair to say that Jesus is both shepherd and the gate. So, okay, so but God is a nominee for shepherds. Who else are we talking about? Or Jesus is also as God? So here's one tip, and this is a little bit obscure maybe, but obviously Jesus is often drawing on Hebrew scriptures or Old Testament passages. There's a long history of using herding and grazing imagery in the work of the prophets and the wisdom literature. To Brian's point, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want, right? So God is imaged as a shepherd. There are also many other passages in Jeremiah, in Ezekiel and others. Do you recall at all in those Old Testament passages who is generally referred to as shepherds? So here's the thing. They're not exclusively religious leaders. So there is a tendency to read this whole section about shepherds and bandits and taking care of the sheep and thinking that who Jesus is talking about are the Pharisees, right? You are people who are fake shepherds, right? You You've thought that you had shepherds and you've acted like you were, but you don't know the sheep and you don't care about the sheep and the sheep won't follow you. You're really thieves, right? So there's, especially within the context of the passage, there's this tendency, and plus in modern day language, pastors are, the Latin word for pastor really means one who feeds livestock, right? But here's the thing, in the Old Testament imagery, it's not so much religious emphasis as it is a political emphasis. Okay, so follow me just for a second. In the Old Testament, Israel is not just a religious entity, right? They are a nation. They are a political religious entity. They are, sometimes we say they're a theocracy, right? So you can never look at Israel in the Old Testament as purely a religious entity. And in fact, in those passages where the prophets themselves are using the shepherding metaphor, they're not talking about the Levite priests. They're talking about the kings, right? So listen to what Jeremiah 10:21 says. For the shepherds are stupid and do not inquire of the Lord. Therefore, they have not prospered and all their flock is scattered. That's a word about the kings. That's not a word about the priests or the ritual religious leaders. This is a lengthier passage, but listen to this in Ezekiel 34, 1-10. The word of the Lord came to me, mortal, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel, right? Prophesy and say to them, to the shepherds, thus says the Lord God, you shepherds of Israel who have been feeding yourselves, should not shepherds feed the sheep? You eat the fat, you clothe yourselves with the wool, you slaughter the fatlings, but you do not feed the sheep. You've not strengthened the weak, you've not healed the sick, you've not bound up the injured and have not brought back the strayed. You've not sought the lost, but with force, the sword, and harshness you have ruled them. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd, and scattered they became food for all the wild animals. My sheep are scattered, they wandered over all the mountains and on every high hill. My sheep are scattered over all the face of the earth with no one to search or seek for them. So do you hear that? That it's very clear that the prophets are not talking about exclusively religious or ritual leaders. They're talking about political leaders, right? Who have, at least in the ancient world, these religious leaders had a very clear impact on religion. But probably what we ought to have in mind when we read these texts is not just like the modern equivalent of he's just talking to the church, right? And leaders in the church. He's really asking us to think about all of those who have authority over us. And what kind of leader is worthy of following? It's really quite revolutionary when you think of someone in the first century is challenging the most fundamental notions of governance. Whether we're talking about national or regional or in the church or any organization where there's authority is wielded over somebody else. Because what he's setting up a kind of a binary alternative. There are either those people who are caring, shepherd is a metaphor of caring more than anything, who have personal knowledge and interest in those that they lead. Those who yield trust. And yield trust not by coercion. They don't have to push and herd them. They lead them out. And the sheep are motivated not by coercion, but by attraction. Right? So in contrast to that, Jesus says, there are those who, though they pretend to be sheep, that is having your own interest at heart, they in fact are there to exploit you, to use you. They're like rustlers. And they use all kinds of backdoor ways, meaning they're not honest, they're not transparent, right? And then they're not even recognized by the gatekeeper, so there's no validation of who they are. And so when you start to think about this text that way, you see that really what Jesus is saying here has application to a much wider set of experiences than just the church itself. We only have a few minutes left, so let me just ask you this. what is the intended effect of Jesus's parable here? To first talk about shepherds and rustlers, and then gates and gatekeepers, and then wolves, and kind of the various ways he unpacks this metaphor. What do you think the intended effect of this teaching is supposed to be?
Whatever it was, our class doesn't know it.
Sure you do. Well, okay, let's just reverse engineer it. What was the effect? Skip down to the end, to verse 9. Somebody read 19 through 21.
Yeah. Again, the Jews were divided because of these words. Many of them were saying, "He has a demon and is out of his mind. Why listen to him?" Others were saying, "These are not the words of one who has a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?"
So that was the actual effect. Is that what Jesus was going for? Was there another effect in mind? What do you think?
Well, isn't he referring to himself in these passages after verse 11 as he being the good shepherd?
He is, and he's contrasting himself with all other forms of authority.
Right. And so he is the one who is caring for the sheep, and the sheep are following his voice. Or that is what well, he lays down his life for the sheep and the sheep follow him. Or that is what is intended.
Right. Yeah, so let me just kind of summarize a couple of ideas, I think. And I think these are kind of obvious to you, even if we're not articulating them. Jesus very clearly wants all of the hearers, whether they are just kind of disciples or they're people in the crowd or they're the religious leaders, he wants them to think very carefully about not just spiritual leaders, but about all authority in their life. And he wants them to evaluate their character, their motives, their deeds, their relationship with those they have power over, and the quality of life that results from their authority. Right? Do they steal and destroy, or is it life abundant and pasture and safety and security and all those kinds of things? Right? So Jesus, in effect, introduces a criteria, in fact, a quite radical criteria for the day of evaluating leaders. And of course, he sets up this tremendously high standard, and at the end, that the shepherd will actually die for you. Again, comes all the way back to the very first passage we read today, right? Martyrdom and self-giving love is the very centerpiece of the kingdom of God, right? So you might say that Jesus' intended effect was in fact what happened. He wanted to divide them, right? He wanted to so vividly cast light on the quality of authority and leadership that they would be disrupted. They would be jarred from their normal patterns of thinking about the world in which they lived, and they would be awakened to realize that there's an alternative reality with love at the center of it, with truth, with liberty, with dignity, with those values that I opened with. And those who don't see it, they think he's a crazy man. He's demon possessed. He's out of his mind. But those who see it they're gripped by it. And so I kind of think this exactly was the effect he was looking for. Sometimes before you can unify, you have to divide first, to break people away from false idols right? And then create a new fold that's healthy and loving and all that kind of stuff. So that's interesting.
Brad, when we're trying to sell something, a new technology to somebody, we say among ourselves, we have to make them sick before we can heal them.
I can't give you a solution if you don't know the problem. That's great. Great. Let me close with this other news item. And I like this. It's just because it makes me smile, but also I think it fits what we talked about. Some of you may have seen a news item this week about pink seesaws, teeter-totters that were built on the US border wall. Did you see this?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's great. So there was this art project that won the 2020 London Design Award, which is kind of like the Oscars for architectural design and things like that. And so it was given to a group in Juarez that had a project called the Teeter-Totter Wall. And it was installed in July 2019, where they had built up a new section of the border wall. And this was a section where it's those steel slats, those vertical slats with gaps in between them. And so what they did on the border between El Paso and Juarez, Mexico, is they slid pink steel beams between the gaps in the wall, so that half stuck on the Juarez side and half stuck out on the El Paso side. And then they worked with the local community over in Juarez and in El Paso to invite children to come to the wall, and they could play. And their parents could come and they could talk through the fence, and the children could ride the teeter-totter. And it's this great example of turning something that was designed to divide into something that unified. And it makes me smile because of the sheer subversion of it, right? And I love that imagery. And I love the triumph of the human spirit that says we will not be divided. We will give dignity, and respect where it's due. So I'll leave you with that image as kind of an illustration of what Jesus was really trying to get at in his teachings here. So thank you all. Bless you all. Hope you have a wonderful week. And I look forward. I'm doing 2 weeks in a row, so I look forward to being back with you again.
Look forward to you next week. Thank you so much, Brad. And now, I know Diana's going to pray, and then as soon as she does that, she's going to go get her Fauci ouchie. And then, but before she does, Ron and Lisa, you joined us at halftime. Are you guys doing all right? Ron and Lisa Mearshon? We will assume so. Diana, go ahead and please close us in prayer.
Heavenly Father, thank you for this time today. Thank you for Brad and for his shedding light on your word for us. Father, help us take these words and take them to heart, and may they transform our lives this week as we go forth in this strange world we live in right now. Help us to see where we can be uniters and not dividers. Help us to see where our routines and our ruts have caused us in maybe ways to become divisive. Open our eyes, Lord, and help us to go forth and show your Savior's love to those around us. Help us to love our neighbors in radical ways. Father, you've heard all the names of those who are sick and suffering right now, especially those with COVID-19. We pray for Greg Patton as he has been hospitalized. We pray for Ken, Lord, as he battles this pain that he was hoping to get relief from. Father, we lift up to you Sally and Alice as they go to Houston this week, and just give Sally wisdom as she learns about this research trial, give them safety as they travel. We lift up to you Vicki as well as she travels back home this week. Continue to keep them safe, Lord, and give them wisdom as to where they should go and where they should not go. Father, for all of us, protect us. We give thanks that you have given us protection, and pray that you would give us wisdom as to how we can best protect ourselves and protect our neighbors out of love for one another as we go out this week. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
We're doing okay.
Oh, good, good, Lynn, good, Ron, Lisa. Glad to hear from you.
Get it off the mute.
Hey, you guys are going to want to hear the first part of this lesson. I think you'll really enjoy it. It'll be on the air this afternoon.
All right, will do.
Okay.
Thank
Bye,
you, guys.
everybody.
I really enjoyed the lesson today. It was
Okay.
wonderful. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Tony.
Brad.
Yes.
All right, have a good
Good
day.
evening, everybody.
And
At
Jerry
1
said
o'clock,
something.
1 o'clock church conference.
Yeah.
1 o'clock
1
church.
o'clock church conference.
Thank you, Jerry. Good reminder. Thank you very much. Everyone be safe, stay well.
Bye.
Hey, Vicky, do you want me to call for you this week?